We're recording now, Alexander. So before we get to our main video, we have two topics that I want to discuss with you. The first one, we could make it very quick, but I thought it was interesting. And that is George W. Bush. George W. did a web video where he called for the unity of America to fight the CV. And, all the same, we're in this together and these are difficult times and blah, blah, blah. And this is coming from George W. Bush. I mean, I think he released it as kind of a little bit of a jab towards Trump as well. There's no secret that Bush, being a neocon, establishment, warmonger, hates U.S. President Trump. I think that goes without saying. But when Bush released the video, of course, the neoliberal establishment, Hollywood, left. They praised it because Bush has been rehabilitated. He's this friendly little painter guy that paints dogs and trees now, and he's this very peaceful, ex-U.S. president. But there were some people that really did lay into Bush, and rightly so, because he is the architect of Iraq WMDs, the hoax there, and the Patriot Act and all that stuff. And let me just read you one quick quote from The Intercept's, I think he's still with The Intercept, Jeremy Scahill, who had this to say about Bush's little web video. "The nice little painter man who passed mints to Michelle Obama at a funeral is actually a mass murderer who belongs in front of a war crimes tribunal, not being praised for releasing web videos." There was also another comment on Twitter which said, "Good morning, George W. Bush belongs in The Hague." So Alexander, what do you make of the Bush web video and his continuing and evolving rehabilitation?
Well, first of all, I think you're absolutely right. George W. Bush and Donald Trump dislike each other intensely. Donald Trump has made it very clear that he completely disagrees now with George W. Bush's war on Iraq. And I think that the two men just don't get on at all. And there's a long-standing feud between Donald Trump and the entire Bush family. So that's what that's all about. And of course, this is George W. Bush very sneakily trying to capitalize on the criticisms that some people in the neoliberal mainstream media have been making of Donald Trump's handling of the corona crisis. That's what this video is all about. So I am the great person, the unifier, the person who believes in bringing the nation together, as opposed to this terrible man who's president now, who divides everybody and doesn't focus as I did, and I would want to do if I would do if I was still president, on uniting the nation against this great struggle. So that's what George W. Bush is all about. And frankly, he should not be allowed to get away with it because he was a disastrous president. It was he who got the United States involved in this massive way in the Middle East. It was he who basically gave the keys to the neocons who had already been brought into the coup, if you like, by the Clintons. And let's always remember that the Clintons and George W. Bush actually got on very well. Hillary Clinton supported all of George W. Bush's various wars. There's a huge amount of interconnections and intertalk between the two camps, and it's become increasingly clear that they're both on the same side. Anyway, if you think the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton are bad, so is George W. Bush. George W. Bush's war in Iraq was a disaster, and his general involvement of the United States in the Middle East was a disaster too. And I think he also very badly mishandled the war in Afghanistan. He went into Afghanistan. He took the United States into Afghanistan to get hold of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And when they were there basically for the taking, he diverted everything to Iraq. So that gave Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda a further lease of life, which they didn't deserve to have. And it meant that they were given the ability to reorganize and to come back, which they did with a vengeance. And we also know how Al-Qaeda in Iraq eventually evolved into ISIS, which is all traceable to the bad decisions that George W. Bush made. So rehabilitating this man is totally inappropriate. It is nonetheless happening. And can I just remind you, Alex, of this quote that you gave me the other day by none other than Jim Comey, former director of the FBI, the one in which he bragged about how he sent the FBI officers into the White House and how he was able to get away with it. He also actually, in that same quote, he actually praises George W. Bush. He says that in a more organized administration like that of George W. Bush or Obama, he wouldn't have been able to get away with it. And he says in that same quote that, we should reassess, perhaps. We should review and think differently, perhaps, about how George W. Bush ran things. So we now see the neoliberal Democratic Party establishment busy rehabilitating George W. Bush, the same person who from 2001 until 2008 they spent all their time criticizing, abusing, saying what a terrible president he was, which he was. But Trump derangement syndrome trumps it all. From their point of view, anybody who is against Trump, even if he was a disastrous president, even if he led the United States into catastrophic wars, even if he was a mass murderer, some people say, or somebody who should be hauled up in front of the Hague, anybody like that, it's fine. We can embrace him because Donald Trump, who, remember, has started no fresh wars. I mean, he's managed to keep the United States out of new wars. He's pulling the United States out of Afghanistan. He seems to be winding down very slowly and step by step in Syria. Donald Trump, nonetheless, is someone who apparently we hate so much that, if it means embracing people like George W. Bush and saying what a fine president he really was, well, we're going to do it. Now, it's just as well there are some people on the left for whom this is too much and it goes too far. And that's why we get all of these criticisms. But that is not representative, I think, of how the DNC neoliberal mainstream is approaching George W. Bush. From their point of view, he is the hero because he's now taken on Donald Trump. And all the terrible things he did, all the bad and mistaken things he did as president, they're all forgiven.
Terrible things he did. And one final note, Alexander, he's also very good friends with Obama, Barack Obama, and Michelle Obama. So what does that tell you about the Obamas? That they're friends with a neocon warmonger murderer
Absolutely.
Who lied the United States into a fake war, fake war.
A fake war, and who also presided over an administration which institutionalized enhanced interrogation techniques, which the Supreme Court of the United States has essentially said were illegal, and torture. I mean, this is so. I mean, that's the other thing about George W. Bush, and yet Obama, the great constitutional lawyer, the man who criticized Guantanamo Bay, the man who on the very first day he became president brought everybody into the Oval Office. I mean, I'll never forget this picture. And, he signs a thing about shutting down Guantanamo Bay. Still open, remained open all the time he was president. He didn't prosecute a single person who was involved in the enhanced interrogation procedures, which he had criticized before. Well, there we go. That's the kind of man Obama is. And of course, Obama, unlike Donald Trump, did start fresh wars. He started a fresh war in Syria. He started a fresh war in Libya. And of course, he gave the green light to the Saudi invasion of Yemen.
Ukraine.
And of course, Ukraine. I mean, well, how can I possibly forget Ukraine? So, I mean, it's not surprising that Obama and Trump Obama and Bush, George W. Bush, get on so well, because ultimately, when you drill down into it, apart from some rhetorical difference, in practical terms, they're the same.
Yeah, two warmongers. So we go to another one of Obama's friends is part of what I like to dub the neoliberal rat pack. That consists of Obama, Trudeau. Back then it was Renzi. You had Hollande, and now it's Macron. And that is, of course, Miss Chancellor Angela Merkel, who we thought wrongly, I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, we thought she was done for, but now it looks like she may be up for a 5th term in Germany. Thank you to the CV pandemic and the way she has handled the pandemic in Germany.
Yes, it's absolutely extraordinary, actually, because a few months ago she really was on the ropes. I mean, she'd announced that she would retire. Her party was, collapsing in the polls. It was losing state elections all over the place. There were more and more criticisms of her, and of course, it did look finally, after a huge, protracted, slow motion exit, that an exit was at least finally coming. And then, of course, the CV crisis comes along. She did nothing to prepare Germany for it, because, can I just say, there's been lots of criticisms of Donald Trump and other people that, they didn't do enough to prepare their countries for the CV crisis. Merkel did nothing also. I mean, she didn't do anything. I mean, I can remember this time in January and February when, as I said, Merkel was just very much, as she always is, asleep at the wheel. And then what happened was that Germany's very, very efficient bureaucracy, which is very decentralized in the various Länder, swung into action when CV came along. And of course, Merkel has coasted on the apparent success of that. And she's managed to rally support around her. She's always been very, very skilled. Whatever else we think about Merkel, she's a very skillful politician, very skilled at public relations. She got rid of AKK, her putative successor. She was able to put off seemingly indefinitely the elections for who was to lead the CDU. So she's got no obvious successor now. So she's exactly where she likes to be, back in control, back at the center, back in control of Europe, because this is what the eventual effect of all of these various EU summits that we've been talking about recently, and the way the way they've panned out, with Germany once again insisting, Merkel just once again insisting that you can't have mutual debt issuance. You've got to have loans, which of course she's the person who authorizes. So once again, she's Queen of Germany and Queen of Europe. It's extraordinary. I mean, this individual has more lives than Count Dracula does. I mean, I don't wonder what exactly you can do to knock her out. And can I just make a few observations? I mean, I stick with what I say. Her leadership of Germany has been calamitous. It has led to the total stagnation and withering away of the German economy. I don't know whether it's not been widely publicized, but last year, in 2019, Russia overtook Germany as the biggest economy in Europe. And in fact, I mean, my opinion is that that understates the margin, but purchasing power parity GDP, as calculated by the IMF, Russia now is significantly bigger than Germany's economy. And I predict that gap is going to grow. It's going to go on growing. Russia has lots of high-tech industries. It's got internet, it's got whatever you like. It's got internet companies, it's got all kinds of companies. Germany has nothing like that. It's still very focused around its traditional industries, its car industry, its old chemical industry, its very strong Mittelstand, and it's got all the abilities. I know Germany's got all the abilities to grow dynamically, but it is not doing it because of the very poor way it is being run by somebody who doesn't want to see it develop and evolve, because she is very happy keeping it everything, everywhere as it is, because her entire policy is to maintain a stagnation which prevents anybody from mobilizing against her. She doesn't like to do anything that will disrupt or antagonize large sections of the population or of the political class, which means, of course, that what you get is immobility and stagnation. So it is a tragedy for Germany if she stays, but it's now becoming a possibility. I mean, even people like Horst Seehofer, formerly her critic, who was, the interior minister who wanted to impose border controls during the migrant crisis, even he's now talking about Merkel getting a fifth term. And her popularity has recovered because, as I said, she's getting credit for a CV response that she's not really had much to do with anyway. But there we are. It's an indication of the political desert that she has created around herself in Germany. So it's bad for Germany, it's bad for Europe, but it's very good for Angela Merkel.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when the crisis was unfolding, Merkel self-quarantined herself because she didn't know what the hell to do about it, how to handle Germany and how to handle Europe. So she self-quarantined, disappeared for 2-3 weeks, and now she's getting the benefit of the relative success that Germany has had dealing with the pandemic. So I mean, she just happened to be sitting in the chair. She didn't really do anything. She self-quarantined. She shut up. She self-quarantined. And now she's coming out of this smelling like roses. This is terrible for Europe. This is absolutely terrible for Europe. It's terrible for Germany. I don't know what to say. How does this woman survive for 5 terms? Five.
Yeah. I mean, can I just say, first of all, quickly, you're absolutely right to bring up the way in which she self-quarantined for an inordinately long period of time. Now, Putin, who is her, great rival, nemesis, if you like, he's also isolated himself, but he's constantly visible on television. He's got televisions there. He has meetings with people. You see him through that eerie period. You didn't see Merkel, and there was this bizarre EU summit when they didn't see Merkel. They saw a photograph of her because there was no actual visual image, and they didn't even hear her voice. It was a spokesman talking. So she would tell the person what to say, and he'd say it was apparently absolutely spooky. But she hid away, and it worked well. And why is she able to get away with it? Firstly, as I said, she is not without political skills. That's something we always have to say. She does know how to pull strings. She's a brilliant manipulator and wire puller behind the scenes. But ultimately, it comes down to the weakness of the German political system, that it has failed consistently to throw up any challenger to her, partly because I think it is itself so deeply and extraordinarily tightly controlled that a real rival is basically prevented from emerging. In other words, Merkel has her skills, but she is also continuously propped up. The sort of power centers, if you like, in Germany keep her there. It's Brezhnevism. I mean, if you go back to 1970 Soviet Union, that was exactly how it was with Brezhnev. I mean, he was incapable most of the time. He had problems speaking, but he always stayed there because, firstly, he did have genuine political skills, which people overlook. But ultimately, there were very, very powerful people who wanted him there. And it's exactly the same with Germany now. And of course, it proved very bad for the Soviet Union, for Russia, to keep this person, Brezhnev. And it's going to prove very bad for Germany too.
Yeah, it's going to prove disastrous for the entire EU because we're going to have Merkel presiding over the
Mm.
pain and austerity that will inevitably come
Yeah,
when the
absolutely.
lockdown ends and the
Indeed.
economies, a shattered economy, a
Yeah.
shattered European economy starts to get moving, whatever the hell that even means at this stage. It's
Well,
going to
indeed.
be Merkel who's going to be presiding over all the loans that are going to be doled out to all the EU countries.
And of course, she's going to come around and say, well, you see, you need a safe pair of hands and an experienced leader to run all these things. And I'm the person to do that because, after all, I didn't really want to stay. But in this crisis situation, we need to keep the captain on the ship, you know. So this is what she's going to do. I mean, it's as night follows day. You can see it happen. I mean, can I just say something? I mean, you get all this criticism all the time about how Putin is, you know, clinging on. And I actually share quite a lot of that criticism. I mean, I think Putin ought to be thinking about the day when he should go. But you never hear the same criticism made about Merkel, except from people like us. And I mean, Merkel is, it seems to me, a far more disastrous person, upholder of the status quo. And yet, if you read the media, if you read places like, you know, the Financial Times, the Washington Post, all these places, you know, what they want to see is Merkel there forever. And as I said, what the effect of that's going to be for Germany and Europe, I mean, it just doesn't bear thinking about. But it's quite likely, well, we know nobody's there forever, but it's quite likely that she's going to be there now for a very, very long time. As I said, she's got more lives than, you know, than Count Dracula did. I mean, you know, I don't know if you've seen all those horror films when Count Dracula is constantly resurrected. It seems to me the same. I mean, you think you've seen the end of her, and, you know, she comes creaking out of her tomb. She comes coming back. It is bizarre.
Well, she is a vampire, that's for sure.
She is a vampire. Well, she is. I mean, she sucks the life force out of German politics and out of European politics and out of and ultimately out of Germany's economic system. When she does eventually go, things are going to fall apart very, very rapidly.
All right. Well, when and if.
When and if.
All right. All right. That's it for this roundup. Let's get to our main video.